In this video, we're going to talk about goals. But before I talk about goals, I need to talk about purpose. What do I mean by purpose? It's the big stuff. It's the family stuff, the career stuff. It's useful to be clear on what that purpose is before we start to set any goals. Here's Claire. Now, you may have seen Claire before. She's not really called Claire. But in this video, we're calling her Claire. Her purpose is raising money for charity by running marathons. Claire identifies herself as a marathon runner, and that's her purpose, to raise money for charity. So if Claire's purpose is raising money for charity by running marathons, it's useful to identify a headline measure that says whether we're achieving anything in relation to our purpose. For Claire, it might be running a London marathon in 5 hours. So to achieve that, underneath that, there need to be some goals. Now, for me, there are two kinds of goals worth considering. The first goals I call output goals. These are things in this scenario that happen during the marathon. So while running the marathon, Claire or anybody needs to have a degree of fitness. They need to be mentally strong. They need to maintain a good pace. Those things need to be true for them to be able to achieve the outcome of running the marathon in 5 hours. But I call these output goals because they are the output from something else. They are the result of something else. So if I said to you, what would someone do before running a marathon to prepare them, then hopefully you'd have the same sort of things in your head as I've got in mine. There's some weekly training they need to do. They need to think about their diet. They need to do something about their motivation. I call these types of goals input goals. So these are the goals we need to achieve that then enable us to achieve the output goals. And those go hand in hand. You need both. Most people couldn't just rock up at a marathon and run the marathon in 5 hours. So both the output goals and the input goals are really important. But like most of us, Claire has got lots of other stuff going on in her world. Her world is not just about running marathons. There's kid stuff, there's work stuff, there's home stuff. The roof's leaking, the light has come on the car to show the car needs servicing. So as well as being clear on your purpose, and as well as having clear goals underneath that to deliver your purpose, beneath that, you need a system. You need to be clear about the what and the when. What am I going to do? When am I going to do it? You've got to have tangible things that enable you to achieve the goals, which in turn enable you to achieve your purpose. James Clear says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. By the way, it is entirely a coincidence that James Clear's name is Clear and our system is Clear. They've got nothing to do with each other. But I do recommend buying Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a really good book. So whatever system you've got underneath your goals that enables you to achieve them, when things get tough, that system will be the difference between achieving those goals and not achieving them. And obviously for us, this system is the Clear system. Catch, locate, execute, adapt and review. So where does that fit then? So if we come back to this model of Claire's purpose being raising money for charity by running marathons, and she runs a London marathon in 5 hours, that's part of her purpose. And then there are some output goals and some input goals. Where Clear fits is it does two things. First of all, it helps Claire focus on the things that are going to support achieving that purpose. When's she going to do her training? What new gear does she need? What books does she need to read? And that's just the marathon stuff. Then there's all the everything else. And that's how Clear unlocks the ability to deliver on the goals that matter. This is where the Power 3 comes in. And this is how the Power 3 can really help you focus on what matters. Let's imagine you and I are going to run the London Marathon, right, next year. So we set as our purpose, this year I will run the London Marathon in 5 hours. Underneath that, we need those output goals. But instead of thinking generically, I think it's useful to break them down into what is it I'm going to do this quarter that's going to help me achieve that headline ambition. So that's where the quarterly Power 3 comes in. So I've written a Power 3 for running a marathon. I don't know. I'm not a marathon runner. I've done a little bit of research. So this quarter, it might be useful that by the end of this quarter, I will achieve a pace of 4 miles an hour. I'll read Yamauchi's book, Marathon Wisdom. It's a real book. And my BMI will be at 25. So that is my quarterly Power 3, my set of goals just for this first quarter. But in order to do that, I've got to break that down into what am I going to do this week. And again, in terms of weekly Power 3, we're only focusing on this week. So this week, what I will do is I'll run 5K. I'll read the first chapter of the book. I'll have a low-carb evening meal for 5 days out of the week. Now, notice I've tightened the language up a bit. Previously, we had quite loose language about generally being fit or motivation stuff. We've got some specific language here. And again, we're only focusing on what we're doing this week. Don't worry about next week or the week after. It's just what I'm doing this week. And then finally, my daily Power 3. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish work by 5 o'clock. I'm going to order that book, Marathon Wisdom, from Amazon, and I'm going to do a meal plan for the week. So you see how your daily, weekly, and quarterly builds to help you achieve your purpose. But the beauty of the Power 3 is you don't have to be thinking about that stuff all the time. Today, you've just got to think about, what have I got to do today? And we've defined 3 things. Now, obviously, those aren't the only things you're going to do today. If we're Claire, she might have all this other stuff that she's got to do today as well. But I promise you this, on any given day, by the end of the day, there will only be 2 outcomes. Either you will have done everything you plan to do, or you won't have done everything you plan to do. I mean, that's assuming you plan to do things, obviously. I can't imagine any other scenario. So if you have done everything you've planned to do, happy days. You've done your Power 3 as well as all the other stuff. But if you haven't done everything that you've planned to do, in fact, if you only did 3 things, be clear about what those 3 things are going to be. And from Claire's perspective, even if she didn't get to all the other stuff, she's really clear that those are the 3 things I'm going to do today that's going to help me move ultimately towards my long-term purpose. So how does this work for situations that aren't about running marathons? Because we might not be marathon runners. So the starting point is state your purpose, write it down. Just start off by writing down one thing that you would say, that's my purpose. What would be the measure of whether I've made progress on that purpose? So state your purpose and identify an annual headline measure. Then the starting point is thinking about our quarterly Power 3. So remember, by the end of this first quarter, not quarter 2, not quarter 3, not quarter 4, just this quarter, I will, and identify those 3 things. What are the 3 things you are going to do this quarter that will make progress towards your purpose? Now, you don't need to think about the purpose because now you've narrowed it down to your quarterly Power 3. Once you've done that, each week you identify your weekly Power 3. And you see how the weekly Power 3 are the input goals that fit nicely into the quarterly Power 3, which are the output goals. They're the end result. So each week in your review, have a look at your quarterly Power 3 and think, right, that's what I've identified for the quarter. What are the 3 things I'm going to do this week that will help make progress for me on that quarterly Power 3? Do that in your weekly review. And again, when you've done that, now all you're focusing on is your weekly Power 3. You don't need to worry about the quarterly Power 3 and the headline annual number. They're there, they're in the background, but you don't need to worry about them anymore because you're thinking now about your weekly Power 3. And of course, in your daily execute process, whatever it is you've committed to do that week, what are 3 things you can do today that will make progress towards that weekly Power 3? And again, the beauty is you can now ignore the weekly Power 3 and just focus on your daily Power 3. Because that's all you can do at any one time, whatever it is you're doing today. The other things are in the background, but you don't need to keep thinking about them. It's a powerful system. I highly recommend it. And if you can, just take 5 or 10 minutes now to go through it and work yours out. It's very powerful. Once you've identified your annual purpose and your annual measure, what 3 things am I going to do this quarter? And then what 3 things am I going to do this week? And then what 3 things am I going to do today? Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about next week. Don't worry about next quarter. Just focus on those 3 things today. And the end result of this is that if you do 3 meaningful things every day, even if you did nothing else, but you did those 3 meaningful things each day, by the end of a year, you'll have done 1,095 meaningful things that move you to whatever you've defined as your purpose. It's pretty powerful stuff. And the beauty is you don't have to think ahead in a year. You don't have to think ahead in a quarter or a week. You just have to think about today and what you're doing today. So why don't you try this out today? If you get stuck, give me a shout. You know where I am. My details will come up at the end. What have you got to lose? You might have an awful lot to gain. See you later.